Hello,
Hello,
Mark, are you there?
I am here. Can
Okay.
you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you fine. So we still have a few people calling in, and while they do that, I'll just let everyone on the call know that a couple of things. So first of all, thank you all for calling in today. This is the final Hawk Talk of the 2016-17 season. We're very happy to have our alumnus Mark Wallace with us. The talk will be about 30 minutes and we will take questions at the very end. If you have access to the chat, you are welcome to type questions in at any point during the presentation. And if you have verbal questions, we just ask that you hold those questions until after Mark is after he gives his presentation. I am going to give a very brief bio and I will let Mark take over. And I'm Chanel Hampton in Alumni Relations, by the way. Excuse me. All right. So Mark Wallace is currently the Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales at Keysight. As the leader of the company's global sales function, Wallace is responsible for orders and customer satisfaction. Most recently, he was Vice President and General Manager of the Americas Field Operations for Keysight. Prior to that position, he held a variety of leadership positions across sales, marketing, and channel management. He has been with Hewlett-Packard since 1985 at some point, and I'm sure he'll probably address this, but I believe the company split in 1999. But
Very good.
before then, okay, but before then, he was a student here at Illinois Tech, where he studied electrical engineering and graduated in 1987. He has attended the University of Chicago for executive studies, and he is currently a member of the Armour College of Engineering Advisory Board. And I'm going to let you take over, Mark.
All right, Chanel, thanks so much. You can hear me okay over the speakerphone?
I hear you
I'm
fine.
assuming you can. Great, thanks so much. And thanks for that great introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, honored to be closing out this season of Hawk Talk, so I look forward to the next 30 minutes or so. And what I intend to do is share with you some perspectives, some experiences, some of my philosophy, and some insight on career development. Okay, so first, a disclaimer: I am not a career counselor, not a professional coach. I'm in business. I'm a businessman. But I've spent 30 years in industry and have experienced a lot, have seen a lot, and I'm going to share with you some of what I have used or seen and what's worked and what hasn't for all of you, as I think most of you are either recent graduates or graduates of Illinois Tech. Maybe we have a few students still. And if you're in industry or thinking of going into industry, I'll share with you some of the experiences I've had. Okay. I think if there's one thing I always like to point out in a discussion, a talk, a presentation that you would walk away with, it's this word on the screen, which is choices, calculated choices, whatever. It's choices. That is the theme that I'm sharing with you, and I really do believe strongly in the power and the empowerment of choice. And I think that is, above all other things, the key to building a successful career. By the way, crossing engineering out doesn't mean engineering is bad. It's not. It's fantastic, but it's a broader application of choice, right? So that's what we're going to cover, and I look forward to it. So let's go ahead and begin. So a little bit more about me, and please don't, this isn't self-serving. I'm just sharing with you my experiences, and hopefully you can glean some insight from all of that. But I'm a Chicago native. I still live in the Chicago area, despite the fact that my office is in Santa Rosa, California, and I've basically commuted for most of the last 30 years. I'll talk more about that later on. That is where our headquarters is as Keysight. It's beautiful, Northern California, wine country. It's a great place to work, to live, I enjoy going there, but I have some roots in the Chicago area, and there's some other reasons as well, what I'll talk about. Grew up in Hickory Hills. You probably don't know where that is. It's a suburb of Chicago, but it's a south suburb, so therefore I'm a diehard White Sox fan. Even though I appreciated what the Cubs did last year, I was still a Sox fan. And of course, I was a graduate from Illinois Tech, as Chanel mentioned. Actually, I graduated in '87. I think that's a misprint because I did a co-op for 2 years, which extended my graduation by a whole year, which was a great use of my time. By the way, I'm sure all of you are taking advantage of the capabilities of Illinois Tech around internships and co-ops. It's a fantastic program, and I owe everything to that because that's where it all began in 1985 when I became a co-op student with Hewlett-Packard. And I'll talk more about that later. That was one of the best mistakes I ever made in my career, and I'll talk about why that was a mistake. But after a co-op, I came on full-time with HP as a field engineer, and the keyword is engineer, selling test and measurement products to the wireless industry. And 30 years later, I'm the head of sales. One thing that I'll just note here is of the more than 2,000 people who work for me today, more than half of them are engineers. So that's just an indication of the breadth of your career choice or your engineering background and how that can serve you. On the right, you see about Keysight, $3 billion in revenues last year. We're the industry leader in electronic measurement, design, and test solutions. But the real story there begins on the left with that garage. And what that is the original garage that Bill and Dave worked in to develop the first product, the audio oscillator from HP back in 1939. And that garage is still there with the adjoining house. It's a historic landmark, and it is noted with a big plaque out in front as the birthplace of Silicon Valley. So we're very proud of that. And basically, you'll see this at the end here, but HP from 1939 until the 70s was an electronic measurements company, making electronic instruments, test and measurement instruments. And in the labs at IIT, you'll see various vintages of HP, Agilent, and Keysight. So that was the whole company, wildly successful until the 70s and early 80s when HP took a turn and said, hey, we're going to go into the computer business. And we did a nice job of starting a computer business. And then in the 90s, we started a pretty successful printer business, as you well know. And then in 99, we separated the company because the printer and computer business was just so enormous. We separated it into two companies. One was HP, which is now two companies, as you know, and the other was a company called Agilent Technologies. And Agilent was all of the original part of the company, but it was two pieces, really. It was electronic measurements and life sciences. And over the next 15 years, Agilent was tremendously successful in growing all of the business, but in particular the life sciences business, because of the explosive opportunities around genomics and the overall life sciences technologies, to the point where in 2014, we separated the company once again. And Keysight is the original electronic measurements company that Bill and Dave began, 75 plus years ago. And we're the industry leader, and we're very excited to be back to our historic roots once again as a company. Okay, so what is this? Success is a choice, and it's not my only philosophy, but it is one of my beliefs, and I believe it, and I encourage you to believe it as well, because it's terribly empowering, right? There's so many things that are around us, that surround us in our personal lives and our professional lives, and a lot of times we can get caught in believing that everything is out of our control, and it's just not true. There are some things out of our control, but there are many things that are within your control. And when it comes to career development, you have a tremendous amount of control and empowerment. And it all begins with choice, and really a series of choices, which I'll talk more about later as well. I also believe in cycles. Life is just full of cycles. You may not realize it, but you're always going up or down. And success, however you define that, and there's a lot of ways to define that, is habitual, either good or bad. So, if you form good habits, you typically have good outcomes. And likewise, if you have bad habits, the other outcome can happen. So I think this is something that I'll drill into more, and I'll explain how I've used this empowering mindset. And I really encourage all of you, if there's a leap of faith, believe that success is a choice and you have a lot of control over that. And you've made a great choice already. And that's because you've made the choice to pursue or obtain an engineering degree. It's a really fantastic choice. Back on the earlier slide, I didn't touch on this, but I've been married to the same person for 29 years. I have 3 beautiful children, one of which has just graduated with an engineering degree. Another one is a junior in college studying business, and my son is a senior in high school and is going to become an engineer as well. I guess I've had some of that's rubbed off, but it speaks volumes about who you are, because there are so many straighter or easier paths to follow, right? And it really speaks to who you are in terms of some of these elements that are listed here on this slide. Your perseverance. You have to be dedicated and persevere through difficult times, ups and downs. You're obviously a problem solver, very analytical, a critical thinker, hard worker. The first couple years of engineering school, a lot of that's just about learning how to learn and work hard and attention to detail. All of these are extremely marketable and desired in industry, regardless of what you do with it. And that comes back to the whole topic of choice. So you made a great choice. The next choice, obviously, is your career path. And you have multiple paths to follow. Sorry, it's just true. When I graduated, 30 years ago, it really wasn't as clear that there were that many choices. Maybe there were, but it just wasn't as clear to me. And it's probably clearer to you. But I want you to know you have so many opportunities. And it's not one choice, but again, it's a series of choices, which is one of my definitions of strategy. Strategy is a series of choices. So have a strategy for your life, for your career. And you can see all the different jobs. Some of them are within the academic world. Some of them are within the industrial jobs. It doesn't matter. These are all, and this is a very short list. This is just, stuff I put down. But, as it goes down further, it probably becomes more obtuse in terms of thinking about what you could do with your background, with your skills, with your degree. And I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunities. I also think you don't have to make a single choice, because the path will unfold for you. And that's, in a lot of ways, what happened to me. So, don't narrow yourself in. Give yourself the ability to make plenty of great choices. Now, I learned this over time. And it's, by the way, everything I'm going to tell you sounds very obvious, but it can be very powerful. And the third choice that you make, again, probably at least 2 or 3 times in your life, big choices, is what your motivation is. And the reason I say that is it changes, right? As you age, as you marry, as you have children, as you retire, what motivates you changes, right? So there's a few listed in here. There's many more. But the best advice I can give you is to be honest with yourself on really what motivates you. And it's not an easy question to answer. It's a very reflective question. And again, as you maybe create a family or work with other people or explore different lifestyles, travel the world, whatever, you need to involve others that you trust potentially in that as well. But I find that everybody, present company included, is not completely honest with yourself because you listen to people around you. You tell your boss what you think they want to hear, right? What motivates you. But you've really got to probe yourself and be honest with yourself and check in with yourself often to align and clarify what your priorities are. So for me, I'll be honest, the first two at the top were important to me early on in my career. And I think that's one of the things that steered me to a marketing business type of career. It was, by the way, joining HP in the mid 80s was, like joining Google or Tesla or Apple. I mean, it was one of the most admired companies. So that was an easy choice. But the job itself was not obvious to me because I really enjoy engineering. And I thought, why would I go into sales or marketing? And again, I'll come back to that in a moment. But it is what I wanted. So I went after that. There's some noise on the line. If you could mute your phone, that'd be great. But then as I became more involved in the company and the business, it shifted to something less selfish. That's not even the right word, but it focused more externally, and that was working with leading customers. I mean, the customers that we work with are the innovators in the industry. It's terribly exciting to help enable innovation. And it was a passion. It was incredible when an engineering director or a manufacturing VP or whatever of major companies would say, you know more about my business than I do, and you're helping me. So it turned to maybe more of a contribution. Maybe that's just part of the maturing process. I don't know. But then it shifted again for me, specifically on May 10th, 1994, when my first child was born. And family was always first, and it still remains that way, and that was a great choice. And it kind of came together for me in 2002 when I made a proclamation about my priorities to my boss and my managers, and it was very liberating. And in hindsight, it was one of the best things I could have done because my career skyrocketed afterwards. And again, at the very last slide, I'll share with you kind of the path I took. But in 2002, this whole idea of family first and where I choose to live and whether that's limiting or not was proclaimed. I made a declaration, and it really did work well. And the only way I could do that was I was first honest with myself. So that's a key part. Choice number 4. This is kind of a crude way because it implies people are cattle. It's not that way. Separating yourself from the herd. Here's the story. You are unique. I'm unique. Everybody is unique. One of the traps, or maybe that's too strong a word, one of the stumbling blocks in business, if you will, is the pressure to conform and be like everybody else. Now, you can be really successful if you're really great at what you do, and there's a lot of other people doing it too. That's great. I mean, there's a lot of critical team-oriented jobs. And this is not about not being a team player at all. But if you aspire for more, you've got to differentiate yourself. You've got to be different. You may have heard the old saying, it's better to be different than better, or whatever the sayings are. And it's kind of true. So the way I've handled this is in this 2-step approach that's shown here. Step 1 is paint a target. What that means is make a choice, right? Paint a big, bright target on whatever matters to you, whatever motivates you, right? Choose something you enjoy, because it's just painful to try to do something you don't enjoy and you don't do a good job at it. And again, that can change over time. That's fine. That's part of growing. But you should always think about aligning to what you enjoy. Now, it's always helpful if that is something that's also important to the world, to others. Because again, I'm reflecting on this from a business standpoint, right? This is not just a philosophical talk. I'm speaking to you from the perspective of building a career. All right, so just keep that in mind, and be good at what you do. That's always pretty obvious. So for me, something happened in 1992. It was a choice I made to pursue the deployment, sales, and engagement with customers around what you would call custom solutions. You know, you can sell a customer a product that works great, but I saw a need and a great opportunity to be different by focusing on solutions, software, consulting, something that goes around the commercial core, right? So I did that, and I was successful. I was working with Motorola at the time, who was a huge employer from Illinois Tech back then and still now. Huge company here in the Chicago area, of course, especially in the early 90s with the explosion of 2G cellular, and they were the industry leader. I got an opportunity to do some of that and then to help Motorola expand their operations globally into China, into Europe. And the only reason that happened was we were no longer selling or providing a product. We were selling a solution. And that ramp was it was a great learning experience for me, and it was a great expansion element for my career. And in 1994, so 2 years later, I tied into something called Iridium. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment, but some of you may have heard of that. That was a satellite-based communication system that Motorola started in the early 90s. So I'll tell you more about that. But these were all examples on how I decided to do something different. And it worked quite well. There were other times where I tried to do something different, it didn't work, but these were examples of where I did it. And then, the step two is to implement, right, to execute. And I do think you can be very successful, as I said, by being expert at what you do. But breakthroughs typically come from differentiation. So that's my guidance to you on that. And then choice number 5, as I've alluded to, it is success is a choice. So choose it, right? And I talked about habits already, and these are some of mine that I have relied on quite a bit. And you can read them. Ruthless prioritization. When I've coached or mentored people, one of the things I really stress is the ability to prioritize. And I use a metaphor of juggling. We all juggle in our lives. You always have so many things up in the air. And one of the things that helped me is I visualized when I was in a job right after Agilent was formed, and I had a tremendous amount of ambiguity, and there was a whole bunch of new people. It was a global position, all this other stuff. And all of a sudden I found myself overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. I was juggling all these things. And because I was so committed to being successful, I wouldn't allow anything to drop. And then a mentor at the time told me, he said, you've got to learn to let a few things fall. And I couldn't bear to do that, right? That was failure. But he said, no, think about what you're juggling, right? You're juggling a bunch of different things. They're not all the same. Some of the things you're juggling are balls, big rubber balls, right? But you also have a couple knives up in the air, and you probably have 1 or 2 hand grenades. So the lesson he tried to teach me, and I've tried to teach others, is it's okay to drop a rubber ball. It bounces away and nobody even notices. If you drop a knife, well, you could scratch yourself, but you're going to survive. Never drop a hand grenade. You'll lose a limb or worse. And, however it works for you, make sure you can prioritize and not just put things in ordinal order, but really adjust your mindset and your behavior based on what you declare is most important. Okay. The second item is uber important, and that's values and integrity, and that's just do what you say. People will behave differently around you if they know you're going to do what you say. And then, of course, that also crosses over in a business environment to standards of business conduct, legal issues. It's just ethics and integrity was at the foundation of the HP way in 1930 through all the different companies that it has spun off. And it's a characteristic of successful, great companies. And we can all read about what some very large companies have to deal with when a part of their company or any one of their employees strays from the values and the integrity of the company. The last two kind of go together, focus on results, competitiveness. Maybe that's a reason I went into sales, but whether you're in sales or in an engineering function or a project manager or whatever, effort is appreciated, but results matter. So you should always focus on that. So this is kind of a pictorial of kind of the steps that I prescribe and believe in terms of kind of the choices that drive success. You could, put anything up here, but these are the things that I believe in quite a bit. Focus, language, and strategy. And I've touched on several of these already, but focus is power. Anyone that isn't focused, really, it's impossible. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to accomplish. And it's equally important, maybe more important, to choose what you're not going to do. There's a great quote by David Packard where he said, "More organizations die of indigestion than starvation." That means organizations, people, companies, the natural tendency is to try to take on too much. So prioritizing means you declare what you're not going to do and what you're going to do, which can almost jump over to the strategy, which is basically the guidebook. I call it, the ability to see the future. That's really I think one of the best definitions of strategy. It's to predict the future and then make choices to get there. And the playbook tells you how to move and then when to readjust, right? And it's amazing to me how many companies out there don't really have a clear strategy, or at least not a strategic intent, right? What they do, what is their contribution. And then when I see strategies, a lot of times there's confused words that sound more like objectives or goals than true strategies. So as an individual, you should have a strategy for your career, which is you see the future, and that future can unfold differently over time, and you make choices to get there. And then the middle one is really about culture. And I think language, spoken language, written language is extremely powerful because it mobilizes reaction or action. By the way, if you go into sales, a big part of this is communication, right? And every time you communicate with another human, you're expecting to get a response. And if you get a response that you expect, then you're doing a good job of communicating. When you don't, then you miscommunicated. But when you scale that and mobilize it across dozens or hundreds or thousands of people, it creates norms and standards and culture. And that trumps everything else. So focus, communication, and strategy, I think, are really important elements in life and in developing a career. So I've thought about what I've done and how I've helped people and talked to people and seen what people do specifically in deploying strategy in career development. And this is what I've used. And I've used this myself. I'll show you, I think, the next slide, and then I'm done. Kind of maps you through my career as, again, an illustrative example. But in owning your own career development, I've used these 3 steps. So step 1, choose a strategy and supporting tactics, okay? And the 2 strategies that I've deployed and coached others on deploying, and the 2 main tactics are shown to the left there. And these are my own terms. They're pretty crude, but they're descriptive. The first is broadening horizon mode, and the second is chess playing mode. Those are the only 2 strategies I suggest using in career development. And I would suggest further that whether you know it or not, you're always in one of those 2 modes. Most of the time, like 99.9% of the time, people are in the first one, broadening horizon mode, which is another word for learning. I've had many people who work for me or work with me say, I want to pursue this job because I want to learn. I want to learn more. And that's great. And that's a valid reason. And doing that will enable you to experience and learn and develop skills. There's no doubt. But if you only stay in that mode, I suggest your career development will be limited, because at some point you have to become empowered. And what I call that is chess playing mode. And the reason I call it chess playing instead of checkers or something else is you need to think at least 2 moves ahead. So, and you can apply that any way you want. It could be in terms of promotional opportunities. It could be in terms of functional change. It could be geographically, whatever. But if you allow it to happen to you, quote unquote, naturally, the chances of it happening kind of the way you want are diminished. So I tell people, stay in broadening horizon mode as long as you like, but at some point, if you want to be successful, you need to take control of your own destiny. And I talk about chess playing mode. And then the best tactic I can ever give to anyone on career development is mentoring. Be a mentor or get a mentor. And it's really an and. You need to do both. I've had maybe a half a dozen mentors in my 30 years, and I've been a mentor to others over 50 times. So you do the math, that's more than one at a time every year since I started. And I didn't start mentoring people right away, so it's probably compressed down into about 15 years. So anytime I have 2 or 3 mentees, and I do it for two good reasons. One is I enjoy it. It's one of the best things that I can do to leave something behind. I really enjoy it. And secondly, I learn so much. It's always a learning opportunity. And I feel guilty because I think often, maybe most of the time, I get more out of it than the mentee. But it's an enriching experience. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is create a brand. That's just fancy words for, know what you're projecting to the people around you. Because everyone has a reputation. It's like a nose. Everyone has one. But not everyone is aware of it. You don't see it, but it's there. And it precedes you. And it amplifies you or attenuates you. I've had a lot of people kind of scratch their heads and say, I see what this other person does, and I try to do the same thing, and it takes me twice as long. And that's involving others, right? It's not just getting a task done. I'm talking about interoperating with others in a professional setting. And the reason is simple. The other person has created some brand that makes them more effective. People trust them. People know that they're going to do something or not do something, whatever. So it's a really important thing is to create a brand, and then the third step is to nurture it, because it's the most important thing that exemplifies who you are. It takes a long time. Well, relatively speaking, it takes years, not a whole career, a lifetime, but it takes a while, because it's based on sustainment, sustained results, sustained behaviors. And it will evolve over time. That's cool. That's what you want. But it's easy to screw it up. It can happen very quickly. So just, be aware of that. All right, last slide. So this, again, I'm just being very transparent with my colleagues here from my alumni, and this is the path I took, and I covered a lot of this already. But this is just to illustrate how some of the principles I discussed were applied. So as I said, I started as a co-op with HP, and the mistake and the surprise was, the reason I went to the HP booth is because they had the longest line, because everyone knew about HP. And I was a little surprised I got the offer, because there were so many other talented people around me. But either I wasn't listening or they weren't clear. I didn't realize that the co-op was in a marketing role. And when I got to work, it was like I was devastated, right? Because I was looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and writing some software or doing some engineering work, and it wasn't. It was doing demographics and doing some marketing analysis and working with the sales team at that time. Well, I after 2 or 3 times, I really discovered some things that attracted me, and I stayed with the company for 30 years, right? So that was a great mistake. I talked about in the middle the HP years. I was fortunate. Everyone, you need some luck, and I was lucky to come out at a time when Motorola was just exploding. So I was put on that account early, which is a little unusual. I talked about Iridium, And that was a chess playing move because I was a successful team member as part of the account team, and I decided to go after something a little different, and that was iridium. And this was a highly speculative enterprise, and it really wasn't successful until after Motorola had left it completely, and even then it was questionable, but it doesn't matter. And we were very successful in deploying just ridiculously advanced technology to help create network simulators for these GSM base stations that were flying at, you know, through in the low Earth orbit at 16,000 miles an hour. You had to simulate. It wasn't possible, and we did it. And it was extremely powerful, and it taught me a lot. So I used that as a means to introduce new opportunities around global business development and other actions that helped me broaden my horizon. And then you can follow the rest. I won't go through all of this, but you can see I've kind of ping-ponged between broadening horizon mode and chess playing mode. 2002 under Agilent, you can see is when I became a senior marketing manager, and that's where I put a stake in the ground. That's where I made a declaration. I told my boss, as he kept telling me, unless you move to California, your job you won't grow in your career. And I put a declaration that said I'm going to keep my family in Chicago, and I'm going to pursue senior leadership jobs, and my choice is to stay with this company, but my first choice is my family. And it worked. It worked well, and it helped alleviate a lot of tension that I was dealing with because I wasn't being honest with myself. And then, you know, went through a number of different jobs and all the way up to the one I have now. So I hope that's helpful. Again, this isn't what I do, so it probably came across a little clumsy, but I just really believe if you embrace the concept of choice and make choices and make course corrections along the way, I think you'll have a great experience, and it's the best way to create a successful career. So that's all I've got. So Chanel, do you want to open it up? Do we have any questions, or how would you like to proceed?
Sure. So if you have verbal questions, you can go ahead and ask. If you would like to submit questions to the chat, you can do that as well. And I will unmute. I believe I've muted a few people. Okay. I actually have a question mark.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a few people that are on the call that are graduating now, or this weekend actually.
Wow.
So what advice would you give a graduating senior who does not have a job lined up?
Well, I think there's a lot of great capabilities and services that Illinois Tech is obviously providing to you, so take advantage of those. I think one of the things that is most important is if you choose to go forward and get a job in industry, is to broaden your ideas or your horizon on the different types of jobs that you would be going into, meaning the work you would do, including some of the non-traditional areas that I just mentioned, outside of traditional engineering or research or product development, but be more stingy on the companies that you choose to pursue. There's a lot of different companies you can choose to go after. It goes back to what I said before in terms of what motivates you. And if you're motivated more by fast moving, maybe higher risk, higher reward, then there's a class of companies that kind of exemplify that, typically smaller startup companies. If there's a particular industry or focus that is really appealing to you, I would focus there, and I would say allow yourself to enter either that industry through a company or the type of company in a variety of different roles to get some practical experience to see if that's the right fit for you, as opposed to filtering simply on, I want to be an FPGA programmer. That might be where you end up ultimately, but if something isn't readily available to you exactly in the type of functional engineering or other elements of what you actually do, if that's not available, I would say put a stake in the ground in terms of either the company or the industry that's of most interest to you. And don't give up. Again, it's a great time. The economy is strong. There's a lot of variability. There's always going to be cycles. But I really mean it, as I said in the beginning, and you know this, coming out with an engineering degree already gives you a huge head start. So all of you that are graduating next week, congratulations, great job. And I would have a lot of confidence as you go forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. We have another question in the chat. I can read this for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the question is, what do you advise for those who believe they have headed down the wrong career path or career track, excuse me, for themselves and would like to make a significant change midway?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. I appreciate it. First of all, I guess there's levels of wrong career track, kind of different degrees of that. But boy, I don't think it's possible to go through a long career without having that happen. It happened to me, and at that point, again, you need to come to terms with yourself on what really is wrong about the career path that you're describing. And it sounds obvious, but if you can determine it's the wrong career path because you don't enjoy it, because of the economics, you're not making what you think is worth, because of your boss, because of whatever, then you can affect change. You can make a good choice. And I think depending on how much courage you have, and you should have a lot, there's nothing wrong with declaring that, again, to your supervisor, to your manager, to say, you know what, I've reflected on this. It's not right for me, and I need to make a change. That's assuming that you want to stay within kind of that company, or you're seeking help from that person. If it's an exit strategy, well, then you just have to bear down and make that choice to go out and seek other options. And I tell you, as compared to 20 years ago, the available opportunities and the visibility through networking, social or otherwise, is just tremendous. So give yourself permission to change careers. Matter of fact, you should alter it many times throughout your entire career. But don't feel bad. This is not you, that you went down the wrong path. I would look at it from the positive standpoint and say, you tried something. And maybe you extended yourself. I don't know what the situation here is, but if you don't have a couple instances where you just lay an egg or hit a dead end in your career, then you're probably not challenging yourself nearly enough. So hopefully that helps. By the way, the mentoring thing is always a great avenue as well. That's why I really think that's the main tactic. And if you have a successful mentorship as the mentee, or the mentor for that matter, but if you have that success where the relationship is beneficial, and it was enjoyable, right? You got something out of it, and it was a great experience working together, go back to those people. I've done that, oh God, so many times. I still talk to people who mentored me 25 years ago. They're retired, but they just know me and I know them. So this network of people who you trust and can help you, not in terms of here's another job, but just in terms of giving you some advice, giving you some direction. Most of the time you kind of know the answer, but it takes others to kind of pull it out sometimes. So that's why if you don't have a mentor, get one. If not for now, it'll help you in the future.
Okay. Actually, if I'm going to ask another question, but please feel free if anyone else on the line has a question. Don't let me take up all the time for questions. Okay, so I have a question about the mentorship, Mark.
Yes.
Um, so I know a lot of people are not clear on how a mentoring relationship should work or how often they should communicate with that person, and just what it should look like. But can you give us a little advice on that? What should a mentoring relationship look like?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I certainly will. So there's a variety of different types of mentorship relationships. Some are very formal. Some are professionally facilitated. And, I've been fortunate, again, working for great companies, HP, Agilent, now Keysight, where the company invests a lot in mentoring programs. So a lot of companies will have established mentoring programs. So that's the first place to look. Go to human resources, and if there isn't one, ask why not. I mean, it's a great investment that the company needs to make because the people make the company what it is. So beyond that, what I have found is, just from my practical experience, a formal mentoring relationship should last 6 months. It can be renewed, but if it's anything less than that, you probably don't get below the surface. And if it's longer than that, you're committing to something that you really can't commit to because you don't know how it's going to take place. You have to be realistic and know that sometimes it just isn't a good match. And that's one of the most critical things that a formal mentoring program does, is it inventories your skills and gaps, both as a mentor and a mentee, and it match makes, right? So if I'm looking for skills in public communication or in economic decision making, whatever, or in technical project management, hopefully you look for someone who has had a track record of doing those things well, right? So that's one of the things that a formal mentorship does. There's things you can do yourself. There's kind of 360-degree surveys you can take and get others involved. You can survey yourself. It helps you to be honest with yourself. But I think that's a critical step, to know what the outcome is you're pursuing, right? Where's a skill that you want to improve because it's one of your strengths and you want to pile on? Or where's something you just don't know how to do well? You're not comfortable with it and you want to close that gap. So that's, regardless, you got to do that. And then, as I said, I think what's worked best for me is a commitment for 6 months. I typically meet on a monthly basis. The mentee is completely in control. He or she drives the agenda, decides the topics, sends the information before, decides what the actions are afterwards. And the mentor is the co-pilot. That's what I always say. And what I've told my people I've mentored is, you're driving the vehicle and I'm sitting next to you. You have complete control. You hold the steering wheel, you can push on the accelerator, you can slam on the brakes, you can turn the car off and kick me out. All of those things are within your control. Now, what I'm going to do is, if I'm going to do my job well as the mentor, is I'm going to navigate with you. I'm going to suggest turns or different courses that hopefully you didn't think of. Otherwise, I'm not adding any value. And you may choose to go down those paths, or you may choose not to. And this is that level of honesty, because if you as the mentee feel so obligated to do everything that the mentor tells you is a great idea, I can promise you, you won't get a lot out of it. Because you have to be honest. You have to say, no, that doesn't resonate with me. That's a really interesting idea. Thank you. Not for me. Great. There's nothing more powerful than that, because then the mentor can refine his or her guidance to something that means something to you. So that's the way it works. And then after 6 months, actually, I've always had a check-in after 3 months, and on the rare occasion it just wasn't working, right? People are people. And if I don't match with your personality, there's no problem. We just stop. But most of the time at 6 months, we say, let's either renew it for another 6 months, let's end it there. But in each of those cases, when it goes 6 to 12 months, you still have that relationship afterwards. And that's where you can go back later and say, hey, you know what, it's been a couple years, but I just want to run an idea by you. Or, hey, I've gone down this career path and I'm stuck. I hate it. How can you help me think about this? So it's a really powerful thing, and I've got a lot of enthusiasm for it.
Thank you. We do have another question. I'll read that one as well. This is Mark again. So Mark is asking, he said, you've stayed with one company long term where many others today seem to move around more. What are the advantages of being in one organization long term versus, moving between organizations?
Yeah. Well, I guess I can only speak from my perspective, Mark. I can hypothesize on the other, but no, I didn't plan on staying with one company my whole life. Although I will say the retention rate with the company I chose, starting with HP through Agilent and now Keysight, is very high. So I guess that speaks to the quality of the company and the alignment that we have with our employees. But also the world is different. I mean, if I were coming out today, I would think it'd be very difficult to imagine a career where you stay with one company. Although it is happening, we still have a tremendous amount of retention, and other companies do as well. But the world is innovating at a completely different pace. And while I've stayed with one company, there's been 3 logos and probably 20 different jobs that I've enjoyed more or less over that 30-year period. So that's the other thing that I think kept me in this company, was the opportunities to grow and create diversity versus not. And there were a lot. So the advantages of staying with one company are, some of the things I talked about before. You create this brand. It's there. It's known across the company. You really know kind of the culture. And the downside is, and other aspects, but the downside is you can become complacent in a one company career. And that can trigger bad things for either you or the company. So I look for fresh ideas, whether that's by rotations within Keysight or by hiring new people on the outside. So the advantage then, as I just illustrated, to having a variety is this fresh perspective. Because, for example, I just hired 2 senior level, VP level people from the outside. And it's a little different than the culture that's existing within our company, because we promote a lot of people from within. So I decided to do something different. And I tell you, it's been so refreshing to have people come in with a perspective that once they say something, you think, boy, that's really obvious, but you didn't see it. You've seen the same thing so long, you didn't realize there's another way. So I think both can be very rewarding. They have their advantages and disadvantages. I think if I were coaching my son or daughter, who I have a daughter that's going into, as I said, is working in engineering now, I would probably err more on the side of look for diversity. And if it means different jobs or functions within the company you love, that's great. Or if it means exploring other companies, that's great too. If I had to weigh one over the other, the stability of trying to stay with a company your whole career versus having a little bit more mobility, I would probably urge people to, be flexible. So that's my answer. Well, Chanel, you think it's a wrap? I think we've run out of questions. Are we still there?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had myself muted, and I was talking.
That's all right.
And clearly you couldn't hear me. But thank you very much, Mark, and thank you everyone who called in today. If you are interested in hearing this webinar again, perhaps you missed part of it or you want to share it with friends, it will be on our website. I'll share the link here in the chat section. If you all would like to click on that and visit the site, it should be up as early as tomorrow. And if you have any questions for Mark or any of the other speakers from the series, feel free to email us at alumni.iit.edu, and I'll be happy to get those questions to them. Um, and if we don't have any more questions, then we are all done.
All right. Well, thank you very much for facilitating, Chanel, and thanks everyone for joining, and good luck. All the best to all of you, and thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Bye.